And that brings me to an acknowledgement that I can't let this hour go by without acknowledging, which was your amazing service in the military. I had the occasion of reading the commendation, the citation from the Secretary of the Navy, awarding you the Navy Cross. And what you did in Vietnam and the courage, beyond the courage most of us can understand, of under heavy fire rescuing a downed a Marine, and then obviously many others, and providing a level of leadership that was just absolutely outstanding, and being wounded a number of times in the process. You really were, if I may say, a real American hero. And for all of us who look to you, I know you've been a great CEO, and I know you've been a great person, but a lot of us are deeply touched by your personal heroism and the model that that provided for so many people, and I certainly applaud you for that. Really.
Thank you.
There's so much more we could visit with Mr. Carter about, but I really want to provide our studio audience with a chance to ask questions that have been sitting in your heads and hearts for a while. This is by any measure a remarkable man. This is your chance to ask him something that has been burning in your head and heart for a while. So we'll put the lights up and we'll give you a chance, and I'll try to find you if you raise your hand. There'll be somebody with a microphone who will find you. And please, ask Mr. Carter what you'd like. Yes, sir.
Yes, my name's Paul Oliver. I'm a grad student here at Creighton, and I also work at Farm Credit Services of America. And I'm kind of just entering leadership in my career, and I've always been struck by how much leadership skills you're born with and so much that you have to learn. And I would like to ask Mr. Carter, as you look in your leadership toolbox, what are some leadership skills that you were born with, and then what are some that you learned along the way? And maybe give me a story or anecdote of how you learned the hard way.
You have to be very careful that you don't confuse charisma, the Greek word for conferred by the gods, with leadership. Because we have a lot of people that are charismatic but may not be good leaders. I think what leaders exercise on a daily basis can be learned. And there are people that have a born affinity to relate to other people. But you can be a very effective leader. And I tell you, every year you see Fortune magazine or Forbes has this article that said, these are the most charismatic CEOs in the country. And oh, by the way, their companies are not doing very well. And then a month later, they'll have, these charismatic leaders are like watching paint dry. And oh, by the way, their companies are doing great.
Yeah.
So I think you have to be very careful to not focus too much on the personality side of leadership. And you know, we entered World War II with 400,000 people in the military. We finished World War II with 16 million people in uniform. All of that leadership training was done by the Navy and the Air Force and the Army and the Marines. So the skills that you exercise are learnable skills. Mm-hmm. And there are 10,000 books, you know, written on leadership every year, just about.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name's Luke Ulrich. I'm a management senior here at Creighton. I'm going to be earning my officer's commission in May into the Army. What advice do you have for new managers as they take on people like, especially for me, taking on about 30 soldiers?
Listen to your sergeants and don't talk back to them. Because they've been doing that for 18 to 25 years. Uh-huh. And there's a period of learning, you know, second lieutenants have to go through.
That's a marvelous foundational principle, and it works in corporations too. Find the person who owns the history, and let them be your teacher. And they could be at a loading dock, or they could be an executive assistant.
But you will be getting exquisite leadership training. You know, the difference in my generation and yours is we came back from Vietnam. People hated the war and they hated the servicemen, and I couldn't get a job. I got rejected by 85 companies in 75 at the end of the war. Today, people may not be happy with the two wars, but they view the serviceman and woman as having exquisite leadership training. A couple of years ago, I interviewed a young Marine Corps first lieutenant. She was 26 years old. She had just gotten her MBA. She managed 600 people.
Yeah.
And maybe $50 million worth of avionics spares.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of experience that you're not going to get in a company in your first 2 or 3 years.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Mike Firm. I'm a graduate student here at Creighton in the MBA program. And do you believe it's important to bring private capital back into mortgage finance? And if so, how effective will QE2 be at catalyzing that influx?
Well, there's sort of two questions there. I think we've got to get out of this foreclosure Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac mess first. But I think at some point, private capital will be seeking a place to go with adequate return. And I think that's going to be important to focus on that. The QE2, which is the Fed's buying of $600 billion, it's going to be difficult to ascertain really how effective that is, because they're buying $600 billion into a market of $3 or $4 trillion. And it's a question of, can they move the market more than just a little bit? But they don't really have much choice but to try it. And in fact, I would have liked to see them try it 6 or 7 months ago. Be more aggressive in it. You know, the Fed is the only people in the world that can actually print dollars.
Yeah.
There's no gold behind them, and they can actually use those dollars to try to straighten out the economy.
In the back?
Hi, my name is Janine Peak MSIC, and I'm here as a volunteer with Business Ethics Alliance, and got to listen to you this morning, Marshall, so it's great to hear you again. You've spoken a lot today in both conversations about personal integrity and ethics and the importance of that as leaders. And it seems like we're at a time when you've spoken about this as well this evening where we've lost optimism. There's a sense of cynicism in our business leaders, especially in our political system. It doesn't seem to be a system that supports ethical leaders rising up to the top of the system, which breeds cynicism. What would you speak to us that would help breed some of the optimism that you still seem to capture in your speaking?
Well, everybody has to have their own moral compass, which allows them to steer their way through, business decisions. I feel very uncomfortable with what happens to our national leaders that try to exercise some kind of role. The media has a tendency to tear everything down. So if I was to enter government, I'm sure somebody would find out that I abused my kindergarten teacher, somehow. And that would be all over the place. So I don't think because you have to open the kimono of your life whenever you get an elected position, I'm not convinced that people will actually do it. Now, you're having a good example here. I've known Dave Heinemann for a long time. He's the kind of public servant that we should be sending to Washington. But, when you have to devote your whole life, 7 days a week, 24/7 to running, it's very difficult. It's very difficult. And you sort of question whether you want to expose you and your family to that kind of thing.
In the back?
Hi, thank you for coming to Omaha. I enjoyed your remarks this morning and today. I'm Jeff Wilkie, and my affiliation is I'm on the Board of Trustees of the Business Ethics Alliance and a local business guy. You're the first person that I've heard that I consider credible, and way more than credible, that said this generation believes they may not live as well as their parents. I don't personally believe that, because I think Americans are more resilient than that. Is it hopeless, or do you think they can pull themselves up by the bootstraps and do better than we did?
Oh, I think they can. I just think it's not going to be given to them as easily as maybe it has in their parents' generation. The statistics on this generation are quite startling. I mentioned this morning that this generation will have 1.7 children and 2.2 marriages. So that's that's kind of,
That's sort of mind-boggling if you do the math.
They have starter marriages now, 5 to 7 years, doesn't work out. And since half of all marriages end in divorce, there doesn't seem to be any penalty for it.
Yeah.
But I think this generation is going to have to work really, really hard because we're going to we might be, you see a lot in the articles about we might be like Japan with no significant economic growth for the next 10 years. I don't believe that, but I do think we're not going to see what we've seen the last 25 years.